Welcome everybody. We're talking this morning about the digital delay and what the effects of that will be on the TECS industry. I know there's going to be lots of questions, lots of interest. If I go back to, I think it was the 22nd of March or something, right? We were in the TSA event when the announcement came through, and I think it threw everybody completely. What the hell's going on here? What is the impact on, particularly because of our, as an industry, the huge pressure to move to fully digital technology enabled care services. And I think since that time we've all wondered, some of us are wondering exactly what's going on, what the situation is right now, and most importantly, what impact is it going to have on technology enabled care? And that's what we're here to talk about. So we have this morning a range of panel members. Some of you will recognise people like Phil Bridges from ZinTouch, ex-Oyster, Rupert Lawrence from the TSA, Stuart Barclay from VIR Care, Aaron Edwards from Renew and Bevan UHB or Wales. We've also thankfully got Sodie Dillon from BT and John Livermore from Openreach. So we got the right team here to get some clarity, I believe. So we're going to move on pretty much straight away. At the end of the session, we will move into a Q&A. Now, anybody who out there, sitting out there listening now, I'm sure some of you are going to have some questions. So use the chat feature to send those questions in if you wish. Also, if you wish to send questions directly to me, I'm monitoring my email here whilst chairing. And my email address is prf@yorbl.com. That's Papa Romeo Foxtrot @yorbl, YORBL.com. Okay, so let's move on. We're all wondering what's happening, I guess, and what the impact is, etc., etc. So I think it's right and proper that we give the two main guys here in terms of BT and Openreach. Now it's BT that announced this, Sodie. So I think it's right and proper that you should really, if you can just tell us exactly what this situation is from a BT perspective and where we are right now and where this is going, and and feel free to say what your belief is in terms of the impacts upon telecare.
Sure. No, thank you, Peter, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak at this event today. Please stop me if I start warbling on, but let me just, I guess I'll start off with just trying to be succinct and clear on the message that as BT has put out in relation to the pause with our migration to digital voice. Okay, so I recognise some faces and names, so I'm sure I've met many people before. And it's really good that John Livermore's on as well to kind of help, I guess, demystify some of the comments and the perceptions of the announcements. Because really, in terms of the All IP program, nothing has changed. The dates haven't changed. The migration is still happening. It still remains on track. And John will no doubt give more details around that. But to clarify, now I work in BT Consumer, and we're a part of the BT group. We provide services to residential customers. Okay, and it's BT Consumer that made the announcement to pause our migrations. Okay, and the reason it was done was, I think some of you may know that BT Consumer, about before lockdown, I think it was probably over 2 years ago, maybe probably 3 years now, we've started migrating customers, our residential customers, to our what we call digital voice product, and that's our voice over IP product. So we're taking people off PSTN and putting them on digital voice. Okay, we've got several million customers, so we had to start the program, and we need to obviously move everybody before the end of December 2025. That still remains the target and the plan. However, as we've been migrating customers, we've been ramping up our migration program, and there's various ways in which we're migrating customers. There are several, if you like, journeys or cohorts of customers and how we're tackling and how we're moving them. One is what we call elective migrations. That's where customers are engaging with us because either they're joining BT or they're regrading or they're upgrading their broadband service. So they're speaking to us. And at that point, as long as they're eligible for digital voice, they're being encouraged to migrate over. Okay. Alongside that, we've also have what we call a bulk migration program. And that's where we've been selecting customers based on their eligibility for digital voice in large groups. And we've basically been migrating them en masse. Okay. And we having 7 million customers, we're trying to migrate as many as we can as quickly as possible. So it's a case of just trying to migrate the easy customers, the customers that are in an area with high-speed broadband. They've already got, for example, the Smart Hub 2 router, which is digital voice compatible. So it's a very relatively simple migration for them. And we've been doing that quite successfully. But what was happening was, given that we've got limited information about our customers and data sets, although we do have records of who our vulnerable customers are, and the work we've been doing with industry over the last couple of years about identifying customers with telecare or other special services equipment through the ARC number process, unfortunately, even using that data to exclude customers from our bulk migration program, we were coming across too many customers that ended up being migrated over that did have a special service, a telecare alarm. And also, we were getting a lot of feedback from customers that they weren't sure what digital voice was, so we hadn't communicated effectively enough with them around, why they're being migrated, what this new digital voice product is. So yeah, it did cause poor perception. So the issues we had with customer feedback, the issues we had with, it was a relatively small number of customers with telecare that were migrated over, but again, we shouldn't have been migrating any without full agreement with the customer. So for that reason, Mark Alero decided that we need to pause our bulk migration. And that's the only thing that's been paused, so that we can go back and review again the whole customer experience and put in place additional safeguards and measures to ensure customers are adequately informed and on the journey and to understand why they're being migrated. And we've gathered more data on our customers to help better identify those that are vulnerable, those that are telecare users, so that we can put the right support in place for them. So it's, just to reiterate, it's only the bulk migration in BT Consumer that has paused. We're working to improve the customer experience, and I can come on to what we're doing in the later part of this discussion. Okay. Our elective migration, so as customers where they engage with us and they're happy to migrate, are still carrying on. We're still carrying on with migrations in the trial areas in Salisbury and Mildenhall as well. And John will come on to this, but just to reiterate, BT Consumer, we're just one of over 600 customers of Openreach. So Sky, Talk, like those air customers Openreach. Our announcement doesn't impact at all anything other CPs are doing. It doesn't impact Virgin Media. It's purely BT Consumer, the residential part, that we've paused one scope of our migrations. Okay, hope that just helps sort of set the scene. Is that okay, Peter? Thank you. On mute, Peter. Sorry, Peter, I can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Peter?
Okay, you're on mute, Peter.
It's that fantastic new saying that we've all developed over the last couple of years, isn't it? You're on mute. Apologies, should know better. Yeah, thanks for that, Sody. It's very, very useful to have that overview. So effectively, I just want to clarify something. So effectively, the people that are going to be impacted by this most are the industry's end users, the people we're here to serve and look after, the people in their homes who don't have any digital capability and are currently on an analog telephone line. That's where the main delay is going to be. Is that correct?
So it actually, in terms of the migration, the way we've been focusing our efforts we've been trying to migrate customers, if you like, that we know generally don't have any kind of special service or aren't vulnerable. So the ones that we can migrate quite easily. Okay. Our intention plan has always been that we will allow as much time as possible for the likes of customers with telecare equipment, so that the telecare industry themselves, service providers, can check and ensure those customers have got the right products that can be used on digital voice or IP voice networks. So it was always our plan to kind of allow that time. Okay. So actually the pause itself doesn't change anything that we're going to do for those customers eventually. They're still going to be migrated at some point in time. The pause really affects the bulk of our kind of, if you like, straightforward customers. By now we should have had more customers migrated over to digital voice than we have done. We've already got over a million, but it doesn't impact anyone on telecom. I mean, in fact, it's actually an opportunity, and I appreciate, the message can be confusing, but it's probably a further bit of safeguarding to allow, yourselves as service providers to ensure those customers have got the right equipment and solutions. And it's also an opportunity for us to work with you to get more data and better data to understand who those customers are. And so that when we do migrate them, we've got better processes in place to support them.
Okay, thanks, Sody. And I'm sure the guys, and there's going to be some questions. Look at the noddings already there. So prepare. But John Livermore's from Openreach, and I know there's been a lot of confusion, not least of which us at the beginning, in terms of who is actually responsible for this. But also, I think, John, what is the role that Openreach are actually playing here, and what impact is this announcement had on what you're doing, if any? If you could just clarify those areas, please.
So I'm just going to show you a slide, if I may, which just gives you kind of rough ideas. This is a lot of confusion because I spent probably quite a bit of the day talking about we're not BT, we're Openreach. And this is probably just a very kind of rough schematic. So BT Group as a business owns another number of other businesses, of which Openreach Limited is one of those. But it also owns BT Consumer, which is where Sody sits. It owns BT Enterprise, which is split into what used to be called BT Wholesale and BT Business. And then there's BT Global, which kind of does what it obviously says. Now, Openreach, as you can see there, we are divided away from all of that. And the reason for that is because Openreach have to treat every one of the some 690 communications providers equivalently. That is our absolute major task in all of this. So we have to make sure that everybody's treated exactly the same. So as far as we're concerned, we are a completely independent company, and we will service BT Consumer the same way as we would Sky or TalkTalk or Vodafone or Zen or any other of the 600 odd different communication providers. The All IP program, or the analog to digital, or whatever people call it, changes depending on who you're talking to, is all about moving away from equipment that was put in the telephone exchanges back in the 1980s. So if you think about where that happened, for those of us that are old enough, not many on this call by the looks of it, but very quickly, this is a slide I show when I'm doing industry. It shows that back in the 1980s, this green box represents System X, System Y, the digital upgrade as it was then. That equipment is old, it's falling apart, it's kind of, had its day. The people that managed it are long gone or on the verge of going. And it was BT Group who went to Ofcom and to the DCMS back in May 2018 and reached an agreement to close that equipment down, to turn it off at the end of 2025. So that's what this whole program has been about. It's been about closing that equipment at the end of 2025. Now, Openreach's part of that is you need to think of us now as an engineering company. We basically look after the telephone line from the telephone exchange, which is still owned by BT Group, through to the customer's premises, where we terminate on a master socket, also in the case of fibre to the premises, an ONT. So that's our bit, the bit in the middle. We then sell those services on to communications providers like BT Consumer, Sky, TalkTalk, on and on the list goes. And they are the ones that actually are your suppliers, my suppliers. So at home, as a telecare client, or as a facilities manager who looks after lifts, or a chip and pin machine, or any single thing that's plugged into any socket anywhere will be affected. So although we're talking about telecare here, of course it affects every part of our lives. So on the day that you are migrated, you'll be migrated to a service that is either part fibre or full fibre. The diagram shows you full fibre at the bottom, there's fibre to the premises, a purple line going from end to end. But the majority of us in the country will be migrated onto fibre to the cabinet, because there isn't enough full fibre out there at the moment. We've made these targets. We want to get to 25 million premises by the year 2026, but by 2025, the majority of us will be migrated onto fibre to the cabinet, also known in the industry as SOGEA. And what that means is that although we have the responsibility to put the network in, and we're trying our best to do that. In fact, fibre to the cabinet already is pretty much there for 95% or more of the UK. We don't have any say on when the migration is done. That is not in our gift. That's not us straight over the wall, because we absolutely want to know. We want to work collaboratively with our 690 customers, the communications providers. But it is not up, unfortunately, to us to make that decision. We have to rely on them to decide when they're going to do it. And that means that all 690 of them will contact their own customers when they want to, between now and the end of 2025. 2025, of course, is the end date. It's not the beginning date. That means that Sodi, for example, and his colleagues have, as you said, only now got 3.5 years to do this, but so have Sky, so have TalkTalk, so has everybody else. They've only got that time. How they will do that migration is entirely up to them. So there's a lot of misnomers about people talk about, also when is my exchange going over? Already happened when we put fibre in. So that means that don't think of this as in terms of an exchange moving over, an area of the country moving over. Don't get confused with stop sell lists, which are only about where we've put a lot of fibre in and we can stop selling the legacy products earlier. Think of it in terms of the fact it's there today, and that it's down to every one of those 690 communication providers to decide when they will contact their end customers and say to them, this is what we're going to do. And the reality is, as most of them on the call will know, on the day of migration, when that comes through, the customer will be told, and I know I can't tell you what 690 are going to say or how they're going to do it, but they're going to say something along the lines of, on such and such a day, we're going to move you to digital. They'll probably say, that seems to be the word in the industry they like to use. And the actual things happening, you're moving to fibre, but digital seems to be kind of the common parlance. And what that means for an end customer is that on that day, all their sockets in their home, but as I said to you, I appreciate this isn't for this call, but it could be a lift shaft, it could be a chip and pin machine, it could be a fax machine, it could be a car park barrier, anywhere there's currently a socket. On that day, when that communication provider decides to do that, and they've notified their customer, the only thing that works out of those walk sockets, whether that's extensions or anything else, the only thing that's going to work is the master socket, and that will only give you broadband. And what that means for telecare clients in particular is that many of them will not have seen a router in their lives, that want a router, not interested in a router, they just want to have a telephone service, but that will no longer be available, because when that date comes from that communications provider, they will ultimately only have a master socket working on broadband. They will be sent a router by the communication provider with instructions of how to plug it in, what to do with it. In some cases, they may send an Openreach engineer and ask us to set up the router, but currently we do not touch the telecare equipment. We don't touch third-party equipment as things stand at the moment. And therefore, the issue of how a customer carries on using, for example, analog equipment through a router becomes a thorny problem, not least for the fact that, number one, you cannot guarantee that that communications provider will provide an analog port in the back of the router. Not all of them will, some won't. Secondly, the end customer will have to make sure that that socket, if it exists at the back of the router, is switched on, a part of their core package. It won't come necessarily switched on unless it's part of their package. And finally, of course, I know there's also telecare folks on here, including hardware suppliers. We've worked with them on testing and stuff like that. The question then is that equipment going to lift and shift, assuming the first two are in place? Are you going to plug it in the back and it just work? And Openreach's position on that is that we do not recommend the use of analog ports, ATA ports, for telecare equipment, or in fact anything that's machine to machine, because it comes without a guarantee. In other words, this is an IP network. You're using a router. Routers were designed for voice in the case of the ATA port, for data in the case of the Ethernet ports and the Wi-Fi. And therefore, anything you plug into the back of it, you're kind of shoehorning analog into digital, and therefore you're sending DTMF tones, which can be elongated, can be shortened, can have issues with round trip delay. You may get the device to work some of the time. It may work 90% of the time. It may work 95%. It may not work at all. And we've seen in testing already in our test lab down in King's Cross that actually it is not as simple as just going, if it works in one CP's router, it'll work in all of them. That doesn't follow either. And the reason for that is because on the old system, on System X, the bit that's being withdrawn in 2025, every exchange or 5,500 pretty much do the same thing. Now it depends on the customer's router, it depends on whether they've got an analog port, it depends on the quality of the analog port, it depends on then the platform, the voice platform that you're trying to push through, Sky, TalkTalk, BT, all different platforms that will be doing different things, that will have in different ways. You've got the various protocols that are used, and I, you know this better than me, whether it's BS or whether it's TTY, whatever it might be. And then you've got the whole issue about the alarm receiving centres. Is it John Tech? Is it PNC? Is it CareNet? And all those things have to be taken into account. And the catchphrase I've been using with local authorities that I spend a lot of time is if this is your relative, your granny, what kind of risk are you going to take with their life on an ATA port that may work some of the time? So that's kind of where we are. And going back to the first point of this, the actual point that Sodi made, which I think you did very well, which is that, as you saw from that first slide, Openreach have not changed anything, and nor have 689 other communications providers. The announcement was made by BT Consumer as one of 690 providers. The year 2025 at this moment in time hasn't changed. And despite the fact people would like it to go away, we're 4 years into this program now, with 3.5 years left. But actually, it has to happen because our exchange network is creaking. And the reason it was signed off was for that very reason. And it isn't going to heal itself. It isn't going to get better if we leave it alone. So although there are changes, although there's issues about resilience and battery backup and all that kind of stuff that you know very well, we cannot just turn around and say, oh, let's forget it then. It has to move over. Does that help?
Enormously, John. Enormously. Thank you very much indeed. As a part of our business at Yorble is the provision. And I think I mentioned this to you when we spoke last, John, is the provision of broadband. We buy broadband wholesale from a wholesale provider. So we're actually one of those organisations who are in the position you talked about. We don't deal with consumer. We only provide broadband, business broadband to a range of our customers, care homes, supported living schemes, those sort of environments. But we've already moved all of our customers that we can move over to SOGEA, either SOGEA or FTTP, every single one of them. I think we've, out of several hundred connections, I think we've got 4 or 5 that are still hanging around on FTTC or ADSL, but they'll be moved over straight away. But I think the consumer point of view is very relevant. I think your point that 2025 is hard, it's there, it's not going away, is very, very relevant. So it's up to the providers to get their act together, and that's the telecoms providers and the I believe the TECS providers as well. So I'll move over and start asking some of the guys some questions, and I'm going to start with you, Aaron, because you're a long-term champion of the move to digital, and that's something that I think everybody knows you feel strongly about. You've listened to Sodi and John in terms of what they've said about the delay or not, as the case may be. What do you believe the impact of this has had or could have or should have on the rollout of digital telecare? Let's just call it that, digital telecare.
Yeah, sorry, John just mentioned there were 689 CPs. I was under the impression it was 650, so there's another 39 added.
It was 650 at the start. I was told the other day by our commercial department to stop saying 650. Apparently it's up to 690. So.
Right, I'm going to go. I'll round up and go with 690 again then in future talks. So yeah, just pick myself up off the floor and another 39. So yeah, I think we looked at some independent testing, and I spoke about this with John offline about doing something independent, either with the TSA or with TECS Advisory, and with Scotland as well, and also the LGA in England, and anonymising some of the feedbacks. I know some of the suppliers have been a bit reluctant to share their findings. But I think we were up at roughly 34,000 testing combinations. So if we were to do this, it's a solid piece of work coming down to John and bothering him for probably 2-3 weeks doing that, because it is going to be an absolute mammoth task to sort of get assurances to people that, the resilience will not be compromised going forward. I think as you said, I've been a bit of a champion of this, Peter, because it is an inevitability. And I started planning in Cardiff for this in 2018. And obviously now I'm in a different position with leading the programme in telecare. The first priority when I came to this post was to get our 7 alarm receiving centres in Wales upgraded to digital by the end of 2023. So at least there's solid infrastructure in play then. And whilst doing that, we'll somewhat focus on the equipment, the in-home equipment, but that ultimately will be, the service providers will have to do that. We feel we could get bogged down in the mire a little bit with that. So we would just want to make sure there's solid, there's 7 alarm receiving centres in Wales. If there's still 7 after the migration, when they sort of take a look at cost and stuff, there might be some, it might be less than 7. But yeah, we don't necessarily want to just focus on the risks. But if you did focus on the risks, they need to be branched out into 2 separate areas, which are opportunities and threats. So I think everyone at the moment is focusing on the threat. So things like analog call failure rates. Well, at the moment, we know from one local authority in Wales, it's roughly 1.8%, which is akin to the national average of 2%. I think that was a piece of what the TSA did last year. So we're okay. I mean, and that's from a dispersed offering. Schemes are obviously likely to be higher. And there was some work in Scotland done where I think it was up at sort of 25-30% within a local authority that their scheme was failing. So that's another issue we've got to look at. But some of the opportunities has kind of led me to sort of build a programme in Wales wrapped around digitalisation as one specific theme. So we've got 4 themes within our strategy in Wales, and digitalisation is just one, because it's like it's the first bit. We've got to get this right, and then we can start looking at the other bits within the strategy that are a little bit more exciting, like next generation telecare and smart tech and second generation digital telecare, rather than just the intermediate first phase that we're all going to be moving towards during the migration. So in Wales, what we're going to do is effectively steer services, and we haven't got a mandate to do so, but it's going to be brought off best practice and dedicated support. Each migration is a project in itself, and some are bigger than others. Obviously, there's obviously some small arcs in Wales, and there's obviously some large arcs in Wales. We've developed a pre-migration framework, which I'm happy to share with English counterparts. This isn't just a Welsh thing. We will share and share alike. And that gives advice on things like tender spec, protocol reprogramming, all the stuff you need to do in anticipation of you migrating. And what you do by taking an approach to the pre-migration is you remove critical things from your critical path. So your go live date isn't compromised when you get to the second stage of our project, which is the migration itself. Now, there does need to be dedicated project management support on that, not just from a supplier. So usually when you go through an upgrade in the past, it's supplier driven. Suppliers give you everything. They give you the project management, et cetera, et cetera. It has to be project managed from the service as well. We've identified that. And then thirdly, so my final point just on digitalization at the moment is looking at the possibility of shared tenancy and more flexible, creative procurement arrangements. So if anyone is upgrading to a cloud-based digital platform, you'll be operating in what we call a multi-tenanted environment. So effectively, you're feeding off a shared data center. When I say shared, it's shared with other local authorities that are going to go down the exact same process as you. So why not join up, keep your operating function as it is, but join up to a shared tenancy type contract, because suppliers will charge you per connection going forward, per service user. So why not explore a joint collaborative effort when you go down the framework, when you go down the procurement route? So you've got the likes of Cardiff upgrading and the Vale of Glamorgan upgrading, upgrade together, join your contract up, and you'll negotiate a better rate. And then you've effectively you've got more resilience built in for reciprocal disaster recovery arrangements, et cetera, et cetera. So I might not have answered your question there, Peter. I just wanted to plug what we're up to in Wales. But
always, Aaron.
I suppose going back to it, though, the biggest impact, just to answer your question really quickly, in a short way long, is the cost ultimately. I think that's the biggest thing. So we did some cost in spec for a Welsh local authority, or I did it, roughly 2,700 connections they've got. They don't have an ARC, so all they're doing is concentrating on getting their equipment ready for digital. So it's that intermediate first generation telecare bit I mentioned. And it's going to cost them over £400,000. Now, luckily, they're the first council in Wales that's got a dedicated 1.1 million for the migration. So we helped them, in a sense, get a lot of the costs to build that kind of narrative. And they tapped into a local pot of funding that was available internally to their council. So they're all right. They're going to be covered by that. And they're hoping that by the end of 2023, they'll have digital everywhere within their domain. So I think cost is the biggest issue, or the biggest impact, will have the biggest impact, as we all know, but we can't compromise on the resilience and the robustness of the solution. So that the testing, I think, has to be at the forefront of everyone's minds in terms of knowing that. And some of the suppliers just saying, oh, we get our customers to test it. It doesn't really wash with me. I think we've got to do something more independently at national level. And I'm happy to steer that ultimately because we're impartial. So, yeah, hope that answers it, Peter.
That does. No, thank you for that. I think the interesting points about cost, I think that roams into the wider benefits in digital, the cost savings, the efficiency gains, etc., etc. That digital is such a wider opportunity, and I think there's a lot of us that believe that can be offset. A lot of those costs can be offset against those gains in many areas. I think it's something for another webinar. Something I think, and that's something everybody needs to talk about. You mentioned the 7 ARCs and looking to get these going digital, and how obviously the ARCs are the platform. Every telecare device talks to an ARC. Fundamentally, not all. Some talk directly to a carer or a relative, but the ARC situation is obviously a major issue, regardless of what BT and Openreach are doing. I think that's a subject. And another subject is that exactly what you said about shared services. Scotland are moving down that road as well at the moment, and it's something that we should be looking in England. England seems to fall singularly behind Scotland and Wales in a lot of the work we're doing with telecare, which I would like to see move up, and we're working with some of our colleagues on trying to do something, encourage something similar as yourself, Aaron. But what is the impact? And I'm going to move over to Rupert now, if I may. From, Aaron's made some very good points there. You've had some clarity. The ARC situation. What is the impact of this digital delay, if any, on the movement of ARCs, the major ARC platforms like PNC, like John Tech, over to full digital?
Well, I think what organisations are really striving for is clarity, and I think that there's been a lot of mixed messages that has happened within the sector, and I think that one of the things that Sodhi mentioned was around getting better data on customers, and I think that organisations really need to know some more of the facts. And you'll notice in the chat that we've been talking around the testing of analogue equipment across the different providers. And I think that really that's the information that organisations are needing. They're needing to make those decisions on their inventory of stock out in the field, and what their plans for replacement are, because, as Aaron said, that the cost of that migration is significant for them. But I think that what it does firmly is kind of lay down the challenge to the tech sector, and particularly the platform providers, because we need systems that are going to be interoperable, that are going to accept different devices. And another thing that's been mentioned in the chat is the current supply issues that we're seeing across the sector with digital hubs. This is a major challenge, and we're really seeing the squeeze. So making sure that platform providers have got systems that are digitally enabled, and when you're going through that migration process to digital, Aaron's highlighted some of the pitfalls and things, and we've seen examples of that taking place, making sure that that's a safe migration. I think that that's really pushing the emphasis now onto that part of the industry to really get its act together, and to make sure that service providers who are looking after this great set of vulnerable people across the country are kept safe. So I think that those are the key messages that I'm kind of taking away from this situation now with the pause. I don't think it's we're not looking to stop at all with the progress that people have made. In fact, what this actually does is present us with an opportunity to be more intelligent around what we're doing, but actually push that forward, and then we can start to talk about harnessing the power of digital and the opportunities that it delivers.
Yeah, that's a very good point. very good point. I think one of the issues from my perspective, I mean, we, as you all know, we offer a digital from the ground up telecare solution. It's just digital, that's what it is. One of the things I think that this does give a little bit of time, and all of our customers need to look at, particularly when we're moving more out to the councils, the social care and healthcare providers, is just what digital could do from a data perspective, you know, from activity monitoring, from behavioural monitoring, all of those things. And it maybe gives a little bit of time to take a little bit more of a look at that side of things to make the right choice on which digital hardware you go to. And as I said, going back to the cost thing, Aaron, I think there are many ways, if you look at digital properly, that digital, the use of the implementation of a fully digital system can actually enhance the services you provide, massively increase efficiencies, and ultimately reduce costs quite considerably operationally. So it's there. Stuart, and we've not forgotten you, Phil, we'll be there in a minute. Stuart, we talked about Wales a bit and what Wales' approach and what Wales is fears. You've been around the industry for a long time, you know, you're with VIAR now, but you've been with some of the big boys in the past. What impact on this, from this announcement, you know, that we all stood there and listened to in March at the TSA event, what impact are you seeing in your conversations with potential clients, with colleagues across the whole industry? What are you seeing, and particularly in Scotland, I'm interested in?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So obviously, for those who don't know me, I used to run the City Edinburgh Council tech department alongside David Brown, who now heads up the Scottish Government side of things with analogue digital changeover, and he works very, very closely with Aaron. I think Scotland and Wales have got some great synergies going on, and they share, and as Aaron said, I'm sure they'd be delighted to share with organisations throughout the whole of the United Kingdom. You mean, and it's yeah, it's very, very informative in what they're doing. But I suppose I've got two things. I've got a question in it as well here, Peter, as well. As it was great to hear from John and Soddy as well. But I suppose one of the questions is, are we looking at I live in the Scottish borders. It's a rural area. Fiber's just a thing we read about in papers. You know, it's not here. And so my concern is, for my mum, I'm thinking of my mum and dad, like John said. Do I start thinking about my mum and dad, and do I need to change their telephone? Do I need to do something in the house? When is it coming? Yes, we've got this end date of 2025, but do we have rollout dates? Do we have a programme of works? And maybe I've missed that, and I apologise if I have, but if there's a programme of works, I think those are the dates we need to be working to, and not 2025. But with regards to conversations I'm having in my present role, with regards to VIAR, for those who don't know, is a fall detection device, and it's also it gives you an awful lot of data strings with regards to the future, as Aaron very kindly alluded to. It's the second phase of tech, but it also gives you the first phase of tech where it's a fall detector. That and that's the plug over. But I suppose the big bit for me is the conversations are, yeah, they're very, very interested. I think we're doing some projects where we've got partners that have Wi-Fi built into, or connectivity built into their hardwired solutions, and we're connecting to that, and that's fine. We are using SIM routers right now because the reliability of certain Wi-Fi or connectivities within facilities or people's own homes is very, very poor, and it's also just an easier journey to go on. Yes, we want to see that improve, and we're ready to jump when that's the case, but we're also analog ready, because when that announcement came, I just said to everyone in VIAR for the UK, we need to make sure we are still analog, because otherwise it's just going to affect us commercially. We can't just be that full digital platform whilst you've still got to be digitally ready. So you mean it's both. In Scotland, I think everyone seems to be synced. They're listening to David and his team. They're following that. It's a bit like what Aaron's saying in Wales. They've got the team together. They've got the right teams together. They're communicating effectively, and they understand the timeframes that everyone's got. In England, I think that's a bit more difficult. It must have to be regional or one big group of people. It'd be some meeting if it was everyone. So Importantly, from a local authority perspective, if I was sat there in my local authority hat, I'd be saying to John and Sudie, what are the timeframes of this? And TSA, how can you publish that to all your members? How can you communicate with that all your members? And also from TSA for the other members who are manufacturers, shortages, you need to start getting what are the shortages. We need to publish that. We need to make sure that local authorities understand that. Obviously, Peter and myself, we're absolutely fine, and Phil, there's no shortages, it's all good. But what you mean? We've got to communicate that to our customers at the end of the day. And I think it really all just comes down to communication. If you listen to the right people, and this is why this is great, Peter, and also thank you for letting us join. But I think it's great that we're able just to have an open and frank conversation and just say this is where we are going. And I think it's something you should continue on a monthly basis, and this could be the new user group in all opinion. But yeah, Scotland seems to be absolutely fine at the moment. Yes, they're going to go down a very similar route. Wales, via, we're getting interesting conversations, but we're analog and digitally ready and working with amazing partners. But I go back to my question. What are the breakdowns of between now and the end of 2025 or the date in 2025? What areas are being done? I think that needs to be shared.
Sorry, I do apologise. I thought I made that clear earlier. There are no regional changeovers. It's national, and it's at the speed of each one of the 690 communication providers. Not ideal, and I would absolutely say that it would be great, and we would love in Openreach to see all these plans from all these communication providers, because it's going to affect us and our ability to support them. But we also accept and understand, because of commercial sensitivity, that SODI and all of his various competitors are not in a position to share any of their plans, because all it will do is let their competitors know what they're doing. This is not ideal, and I'm the first one to admit that, because at the end of the day, it would be great to see us do this geographically. It's what other countries have done. It's not how it works in the UK, unfortunately. We do have a very, I suppose people would say it's a very evolved market, and that means for that reason you've got lots of choice, and then it keeps prices down, and that will always be the argument. But regrettably, as much as I would love to be able to share that with you, I don't have it myself, and neither does anybody else in Openreach. So I would guess you don't even see such plans themselves, because they're all hidden away somewhere. And in every single communications provider, 600 will have their own plans, and they will be national. And there may be some that will suddenly turn around and go, oh, we're going to do Manchester, or we're going to do Newcastle. But at the moment, we're not seeing anything like that at all. So as much as it would be great, absolutely brilliant, Stuart, if that existed, it doesn't exist. And the reason for that is twofold. One is commercial sensitivity. It's what about them saying, well, I can't show you my plans because I'm not even going to show my own people, let alone my competitors, what I'm doing. It then raises the second question is, why do we not see something nationally from, for example, government? So a plan for everyone to get ready for it, like the TV switchover, which we get asked pretty much every day. And it's very much a similar kind of thing. Communications providers will say, if you went on the news tonight, or if you went on to some kind of advertising campaign, whether it's Openreach, BT Group, anybody else, and said, hey, this is happening, you've got 3.5 years, get yourself ready, the call centres at the various different communications providers would melt down the next day, because everyone would phone up and say, so when are you moving me? When are you moving me? And the answer is, they don't know and they can't tell you. So I share the frustration, but we are kind of very much where we are. This is the way it works in the UK. So there is no, don't think about it geographically, there is no geographic turnover. It's going to be at the speed of every one of those 690, and they will decide when they want to do, where they want to go. At the moment, it's happening, and it's happening because every time you switch on your TV, you're getting a number of CPs advertising ultra fast, super fast, ultra fast, super fast. And what they're saying is, come on to that, buy that package from us. And actually, as a result of that, they move you over. It's seamless. They might say to you, by the way, your sockets, you use them in the house, blah, blah, blah. Now, that's great for huge amounts of the population. And there are huge benefits to moving to fibre, as we've said. But the bit that I see, the bit that SODI sees most of the time, is the things that you see. It's the challenges. It's all these issues that you're talking about now, which are real, and they do keep us awake at night. But the issue is still the same. We don't have that, doesn't exist, isn't going to happen. So our message has always been to, or certainly my message has been, I might speak for SODI, but it's pretty similar. I'll let you speak for yourself, SODI, is at the end of the day, the message is get yourself ready. If you have an estate, if you're a local authority, I spend a lot of time with local authorities, reaching out, trying to talk to them. Erin and I are old friends. We've been doing this for a long time, saying to local authorities, this is coming. Get an audit of your estate. Think about what this means for you. Go back to your hardware suppliers, some of which are on the call today. Ask them what the message is. What's the plan? What is their way of getting you over? You can contact your communications provider and ask them. But actually, in many cases, the communication provider will say, we're kind of not ready yet. We can't share anything with you. We're not in a position to do that. But that's the truth of it, I'm afraid.
Thanks for that,
Thanks.
John. And I think that's a very clear statement of where it is. Have you, in terms of that list or timeline, have you got anything specific to add to that, Sodi?
Yeah, I suppose just to reiterate a couple of points there, but I recognise, the concern Stuart's raised. I mean, I think just going back to the announcement that was put out by Mark Alera, our CEO. I mean, at the time, he put it out for obviously what was the right reason in terms of the customers that were being impacted. The majority of customers that were being impacted by the migration, which weren't telecare customers. It was our general customers who were, complaining, saying, "What's happening? Why am I being migrated? I haven't been told a lot." But of course, the announcements had unintended consequences. And appreciate, I've heard, you raised it, Peter. This one's raised it, and other people raised it, that it was taken as, oh, BT's changed direction. Is this now an about turn? Does that mean we can take a foot off the gas? And clearly, what we're trying to say, no, that's absolutely not the case. Okay. So, we've got to kind of claw back from that. We've got to kind of make sure that, we do our best to stop that misinformation or misinterpretation of the message. Now, as John says, our migration is national. We're not doing it in phases. The only areas that we'll be doing geographically are the two trial areas, Salisbury and Mildenhall, because they're much shorter timeframes. I mean, I think, John, just probably worthwhile just calling out that I think Virgin Media, they don't use Openreach's network, but they, I think in some cases, are taking a geographic approach. Okay.
I'm never comfortable talking about competitors, what they're up to, but we do work very closely with Virgin, only simply because we end up doing a lot of the same gigs, really. But we, say David Christie, it might be worthwhile to your next meeting, get David Christie. And if you don't know him, I can introduce you to David. I've done a local government authority one with him already this week. So Virgin have got their own network, and of course they act as both. So they are a vertically integrated supplier. They are a network provider like us, so they're a competitor of ours. But they're also a CP effectively, so they're also a competitor of Sodi's. But of course, there are many others. Openreach is not the only game in town. There are lots of other fibre companies out there. In fact, the Ofcom are encouraging more altnets, as they say. So we're going to see an expansion, both in terms of network providers and, as Aaron said earlier, more communications providers. Because if there's one thing that's for sure, there'll be more choice going forward. And again, the issue is what we said, which is you can't necessarily share all that stuff. Is that okay? So I just make that point for you.
Yeah, thank you, Don. If I just, just a couple of points to clarify them. So I think, again, Stu, you made a good point about, about connectivity, and as a CP, we are looking at other ways of connecting customers and not solely using Openreach's network, because there will be areas, as you say, where fibre isn't available or isn't available in the timeframes we need it. So we are part of EE. So we obviously have mobile backhaul as a facility as well. So we are looking to whether we can use mobile backhaul products as well. So for example, our digital voice product, that's a product that provides both voice and broadband. We have a lot of customers that only require a voice line. So it may be a case of a mobile-based solution is better for them, rather than giving them the full kind of broadband service. So over time, we're developing those products as well. And there's a question I think is asked in the chat.
If we can keep the Q&A to the end, Sodi, I appreciate that. So we need to move on. But thank you for those.
Peter, can I
just add those clarifications?
Peter, can I just add really, really quickly, just something that we haven't mentioned here, and we're talking about ARCs, but we're not mentioning connected care platforms. And amongst all that, where a lot of that, when you go into that digital, you've got a lot of information going in there as well, and then that goes out to the ARCs or alarm receiving centres. And at what point do we actually stand up and say, you don't need that dispersed alarm in someone's house anymore? It's all about the response protocol, and that opens a completely different question, but it's where digital's going.
Thank you for that, Stuart. That's another can of worms for another webinar. we've got to, I'll tell you what, we've got to, it's definitely going to be monthly, just so you know. This is going to be monthly, and we've got a roll of subjects. If anybody's got any subjects that they would like brought up on these webinars, and we've got a whole range of people that are going to be sitting in on them, drop me an email and we'll see what we can do. I'm coming over to you, Phil. I feel that we should state that there are fully digital alternatives right now that are not reliant on the telephone line, that can use existing broadband connections, or if that's not available, can use a mobile, skip over to a mobile connection. There is no need to worry about any of this at all. And a lot of these are mobile, and we're moving to mobile. See, piqued your interest now. Mobile is where things are going. I mean, all your Bull's products are fundamentally mobile. You've been involved in this. How do you see, and I suppose I'm a leading question because I've said I don't think it affects it at all, but how do you see this delay affecting the rollout of true digital if you went in that direction?
So it's been brilliant for me, Peter, to join this, because of course I've been in this for, I think I looked the other day, it's 18 years I've been doing telecare, and I've never sent an analog alarm in 18 years. So this doesn't really feel massively new to me. So it's been really brilliant to listen to Sodhi and John talking about I mean, probably the most inappropriately named digital delay, because actually there isn't a digital delay. There it is that, hey, that ball's rolling, guys, whether we like it or not. Pull the pin from the grenade because it's gone. So actually it's fascinating. And I'd say for Sodhi, the honesty of what he said, you know, about the fact that, you know, the pause is about the fact that, geez, this is not going to be easy, and it could upset things. There are lots of chances of problems, dangers, all those kind of things that sit underneath it. That's not unique to BT. That's for everyone. That's for all the 690. They've all got that problem. It's just that, well, thankfully, BT, because of where they sit, probably are really honest and just go, we've got to get ahead of this, because there is a sword of Damocles potentially sitting above us. So I found it really useful listening to this, to hear that side of things, because I think, you know, there's always the danger for me that we end up, you know, with the scenario of, Henry Ford's famous quote. If I'd asked the public what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And I think there's a danger of, you know, where we're talking about the ATA terminal on the back of the hub. Geez, that's just a faster horse. That's trying to get what we did 30 years ago to work today. Whereas, you know, of all of us is sitting here paying £2 a litre for diesel, wishing we had electric cars, I suggest that, you know, forward motion is probably more important. And then obviously I get to sit on my wonderful, you know, in my little ivory tower saying, well, you know, I've never sent an analog alarm, so it doesn't matter to me. But it really does matter to me, because, you know, when we're talking about the route to digital and getting people onto that journey, there is a cost implication. There is a lot of muddying of the water at the moment as well, which is why I think these kind of webinars, and Peter, thank you so much for doing it, are so important. Because actually, while we're muddying the water, old style technology is still being purchased by the thousand, while we're not got any clarity of what's going to happen. So, and there are lots of wins within it, and absolutely, you know, I know from you know, Stuart's perspective and from Peter's perspective, you know, being providers into this sector that are digital, you know, the world is changing, because, you know, we have a host of mobile products that don't go direct to ARCs. Of course they don't, because a lot of the data that comes from them is an insight or a warning. It's not about, you know, we're not picking people out of the bottom of the waterfall. We're trying to walk upstream and stop them getting in the bloody river to start with. Sorry, the first swear of the whole webinar. I do apologise. As usual, getting carried away with my thoughts on it. But that's it. You know, the route is not necessarily as clear as this. And I think, you know, even hearing Sodhi Nance talking about the fact that, you know, understanding the fact that mobile is part of the communications path. Even for an organisation like BT, of course they're aware of it. So our direction of travel is looking clearer. What I'd also say is, you know, when we're looking at the cost, yeah, that's when we really started to open up the doors and saying, well, actually, if you're spending, you know, and let's be honest, a GSM button and box, which seems to be what's being bought. So let's be fundamentally clear about what a GSM button and box is. That's when a manufacturer looks at a box that had to be next to a wall to plug into a socket and a pendant that goes with the person, and they put the mobile piece of technology, the SIM card, in the fixed box, not the pendant. Random. If you think, you know, about how that thought process has worked, makes no sense. Makes no sense. So I would suggest that the direction of travel is going to change, and some of these, you know, when you're looking at the cost of a digital, you know, GSM button box being, you know, 200, 250 pounds, that's going up every week at the moment because obviously the short supply, so there's lots of dangers within that. We're then talking about, can we do better outcomes for the same, if not a cheaper cost, and using the infrastructure that will work going forward? That's all available now. I'm going to shut up, Peter, otherwise you know I'll never stop. I literally will never stop.
What you're saying is absolutely correct, and I think and it'd be interesting. I'm going to come back to Aaron in a moment on the ARC side of things, because if I look at the work we're doing with various ARC platforms, I should say. Yeah, some ARC platforms are totally non-collaborative, can't get anything going with them on the digital side, and just probably one of the biggest is that way. Others are moving towards digital, things like Scape, etc. Others are further on than that with the use of APIs, etc., etc. If the platforms are there to take this digital communication, and let's face it, if in the worst case scenario, Stuart, out in the boondocks in Scotland, it's down to a mobile signal, a cellular signal, and if that's not there, well, we can give you a satellite if you need one, but that's where it's at. It's about having the platforms being able to receive and being able to work with this new style of messaging, and it's also about having platforms that can take all the different types of data. You know, we've got a whole range of sensors and various things, and we're working with certain platforms say give it please. Others are saying what's that. The whole mobile side of it is and I'm talking in mobility terms. Yeah, I think telecare is going mobile, and in terms of mobility, people, you know, Grandma Smith will be at home for most of the year, but twice a year she goes on holiday and stays with her son in Scotland, so on and so forth. Being able to move these devices, and some of these bricks, if you wanted to take them on holiday overseas, for example, yeah, you're paying extra luggage, and don't drop it on somebody because it'll kill them. The point is fundamentally that digital is available right now. It is right now, and I think it's a case for me of working. If you are on the side of procurement, if you're looking to procure, this is the technology you should be looking at now. I agree with you, Philip, that I know organisations that are trying to procure thousands of analog devices and they're having them thrust at them, which is just irresponsible. And I'm sorry if you're one of those, but that's my personal opinion. I think it's irresponsible, and you're cutting your users and the people we serve off from the benefits of the future for some time to come. And that's the industry as a whole. We'll never get to common data records. We'll never get to these things unless we go. And we'll never get things like predictive analysis in place, proactive systems that prevent a fall, instead of having the NHS and social services spending something like 25 billion a year on fixing people and looking after them after they've had a fall. There's so much there that can be done right now. One of our audience members has talked about these devices being in tune with standards. Now, I know what we're doing. We're for our device and what we promote it as our devices, they're totally in tune with all British standards, and we've got the iTech QSF awards. I know you wouldn't be producing devices, Philip, or you wouldn't be producing devices, Stuart, and marketing them without them being standard. So I can say to that member of the audience. Yes, these devices do cover. You might be talking about some of the older style legacy technology like 869 for pendants and wearables, old style wearables. We regard that as legacy technology, others don't. So there's part of the standards that say you can use this is recommended. It's a recommendation, it's not the law. It's as simple as that. And there are many other options to that one thing that actually open up the whole communications area. So just on that, that member, they are absolutely certified properly. Now, I've lost him. Aaron, have you left me?
Sorry, I just put something in the chat. I've got poor network quality, so I flicked my camera off. But
no worries.
It's okay now. It's okay. If it goes again, I'll flick my camera off.
Well, talk to Sodi or John about that. or even we could help you. But coming back to that the flow of that conversation in terms of digital alarm receiving centres, how important do you think the move to digital, in full digital in terms of alarm receiving centres is to the progress of our industry? And I know it's slightly another subject, and okay, I'm going to tie it in with that subject. Is it entirely reliant on the rollout?
Well, yes, it is entirely dependent on the rollout, because local authorities wouldn't decide to invest in something. It hasn't really the sector, in my opinion. You're still offering equipment and connection nodes that go back to the 80s. So let's be honest, it's not, if we didn't have this external driver kicking our backside in terms of forcing local authorities to migrate, then they wouldn't migrate. So it is driven by the digital migration. Secondly, for me, so on the ARC side of things, so what we decided in Wales is that it's given us an opportunity to obviously help services steer. So I mentioned the digitalisation theme earlier on. Well, that's just part of what we're going to do. By the end of 2023, all of the ARCs will be digital, so to speak, and the vast majority of equipment will be. When we upgrade services, we're taking the opportunity, or when we help them upgrade, we're taking the opportunity now to start looking at the standardisation of data. Okay, so ultimately, what we want in Wales in sort of 3 or 4 years' time is to make a case to Welsh Government that we want ongoing funding, helped by health as well, because most of the benefits of telecare is felt within health, and start to explore the synergies between telecare and telehealth, mobile telecare, for example. So you've got to get that right initially by standardising the data. Now, this has never been done anywhere in the United Kingdom, as far as I'm concerned, en masse, especially across the nation, and it's a big issue of mine. So we've developed with Scotland a minimum data set, 55 data sets. So anyone who upgrades and uses tech company to help them in Wales will give them access to these data sets. Not entirely dependent on digitalisation, because most services don't have ARCs, 14, 15 councils don't. So we'll work over the next year or so to embed the minimum data set. So it's 55 data measures. We then start looking at a Welsh telecare call set. So all of the alarm receiving centres in Wales close their calls down with the same terminology, the same coding, whether it's alphanumeric, or just alphabetical. So then, well, what we're then going to do is offer free of charge and completely technology agnostic, so it's not a supplier driven initiative, is a business intelligence dashboard. So this dashboard is not for trends and insights on people just yet, on citizens. It's for the service. It's showing the importance of telecare to that service, because it's just a means of presenting that data. And then overnight, if once it's embedded in Wales, I can see how many times someone fell yesterday across Wales, how many times 999 was called as a result, and then start looking, comparing, contrasting models against those that have a response service and those that don't. So you can be a lot more innovative with what you're actually doing just by taking some simple steps of digitizing, of standardizing, the data. If we didn't migrate to digital, I think it would be a lot harder for services to do that. Now, I'm not going to mention who my current supplier was within Cardiff, but trying to get the data off that platform was an absolute nightmare. And I would never dream of everyone in Wales closing their calls down in the same way, and following sort of a similar rhetoric with when it comes to sort of how we handle the calls. So yeah, I'm that's kind of like where we're going, and the ultimate end game is a link in with the NHS Wales app. We want to develop a national common record in Wales. So in effect, that's a defined technical standard that's driven from Welsh Government through the Welsh Technical Standards Board, the WTSB. just demonstrating how important social care data is, because at the moment the NHS app is very health focused, as you can imagine, and there isn't any sort of social care buy-in from the Welsh Clinical Centre, which is WCIS, which is the social care record for Wales. So we're sort of fighting the good fight here, but you have to start by collating the data in a standardised format, demonstrating that so there's insights and trends, and we can start looking at ROI measures and things like that. So that's kind of where we're going. So as part of you upgrading your ARC, you're also going to get access to these, and then we effectively can baseline performance measures. So yeah, I hope that helps, Peter. The other thing I would say as well,
it does, and it opens up yet another discussion, but it clarifies a point. I think that the connectivity side of what an ARC does is one thing, and enabling that connectivity to multiple. That interoperability thing we keep all talking about, enabling that connectivity to be accessed by multiple vendor devices is absolutely key. And it doesn't matter whether that communication from that device comes over a cellular data link or mobile data link or a Wi-Fi data link, neither of which have to be analog. They sort of aren't. But the data sets and that accessibility and the sharing that data, I absolutely get. What's your thoughts on that, Rupert?
Well, I think Aaron knows me quite well and knows my thoughts on consistency of data and common data sets being a really powerful thing. And I think that, you know, essentially the analog to digital journey and the move to proactive preventative services, it goes hand in glove really. And at TSA we're very much you know, pushing that forwards as well. I think that, you know, one thing that I'm keen to stress is that we do have a need for standards here, and I think that when we are talking about connectivity, you know, the possibilities with mobile is you know, really clear, and you know, can offer some great advantages there. But we do also need to make sure that we're assessing its resilience, and we've seen through a recent outage with one SIM provider the impact that can have, and some of the vulnerabilities that are involved in those mobile infrastructures, and the needs to have, you know, there's single points of failure and things, and we need to understand more about that. And we've actually recently updated our commissioner guidance around that very point, saying around having dual connectivity functionalities, and you know, dual SIM, and you know, highly recommend that suppliers are introducing that type of resilience within their solutions. So but I think that you know, this whole move to digital is going to greatly influence our sector, and it's going to influence the possibilities of what we can do, and recognizing that the power of assistive technology being provided for people, and the way that it can support you know, a greater set of outcomes that we can capture through the technologies that we're now able to access. And some of these technologies are you know, kind of very far reaching in terms of the impact that they can provide. You know, we talked about falls, preventing the or avoiding the fall is going to be much more advantageous, but we've got to have the building blocks, and I'm glad that we've mentioned data and common data sets, because until we actually get that side of our services right, in the way that we report and use data and access data from our systems, then we're actually going to undermine the progressive work that we're doing towards proactive and preventative tech.
That's absolutely right. I mean, and to highlight that, we're doing and working with Fire on this as well. We're part of a major UK health tech accelerator, government funded health tech accelerator, and one of our primary research points at this particular point is around sensors and sensor capability, and how we can use the overlaying of that data to predict behaviors, and in particular, you know, one is falls, and we're quite the concept is absolutely there, and we just got to go and test the reality now of it. But the fact is, the one thing I always remember being told by Surrey University when we started on this exercise is how much data we need for AI and machine learning to learn. and that we could take up to a year and a half to gather enough data just to R&D it. Yeah. So without the sharing of this data, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's got to be a shared commodity, and what your technology can do with it as a manufacturer or provider, that's your market advantage. What you create, but not the data. The data should be shared, and I know exactly what you mean about not being able to get huge amounts of data out of certain art platforms. Aaron, I know exactly what you mean about that. I imagine a huge amount of that data historically has already gone, because there's no proper value placed on it, which is absolutely criminal, because we could use that right now. But yeah, we've got to remember, it's the data is the lifeblood of the of any form of AI, of machine learning. So that predictive analysis, just triggers like Granny didn't get up at half past 8 in the morning when she normally does, triggered by a PIR or thing. Those are simple things, but it's the data that is there. We're working together, Stuart, on that side of things, and I know we're roaming about a little bit here, and we're about two minutes away from going to Q&A anyway. But what's your views on that data? What's your views?
Yeah, open protocol is absolutely. I've been a big advocate for years. Going back to my days at Edinburgh, interoperability was a massive issue for me. And Edinburgh tried to, it steered an awful lot of telecare way back when I was a youngster and didn't have grey hair. But certainly we secured a lot of funding, and we were sort of driving Scotland forward. But interoperability was a big thing for us. Even when we wrote the Excel tender, we tried to get rid of it, and you just couldn't. We were trying to steer the manufacturers. Certainly at VIAR, we are completely open protocol, as you know. Working on these healthcare accelerators is really important to us, because that data string, we don't own it. It's yours. You have it. The platform provider can have it, and that's, for me, that's where the like yourself, at Yorball and other platform providers like Anthropos, etc., that we work with, that just take that data and they're soaking it up. And I think it was Paul Berney said at the TSA members forum, working in the SIG group or yourself, they've got 200 million data strings coming in, but they need 1 billion. It was something like that. And that was quite damning. But actually, I was sat there as both heads on. I was trying to be a provider and trying to be a manufacturer and all these things, and say, but 200 million is better than the zero we had 2 years ago. So can't we do something with that 200 million? Now, I'm not a big techie guy and can't say that we can do that, but there's got to be some prediction that we can do right now with 200 million. But again, we need more people being open protocol, sharing that data, stop being protective of it. It's a bit like going back to my original question to John and Sudhi, is, do you know what? Let's bang some heads together here, and the TSA can support us in doing that. Is let's get a timeline for each one. It's, for me, it's just that whole interoperability thing coming back out again. But yeah, data strings are critical to the future of proactive and preventative care, and the TSA are really supporting that, and some of the SIG groups are doing, and some of the amazing platform providers out there that are happy to take these data strings, and yeah, that you could say they own them, etc. They can have mine. It's not a problem, because it's for the good of my mother, father, grandparents. That's what's important.
And your children and their children, more important.
Yeah, true.
Absolutely, Stuart. I think it's, and I think you couldn't have put it better there. This data is incredibly important. What we do with it is it's all about making things better. Yes, there is the immediate problem of looking after people with a telecare alarm. There is the immediate problem of that, and how we deal with that, and we can't lose focus on how that happens. But that preventative care, we have a massively escalating aging society that is, and this is a global issue. This is not just here. We have got to pick, the only way we're going to succeed in coping with that is keeping people out of care and out of the health NHS system. The only way we're going to be able to do that is with preventative, is with predictive, is with helping people with their health and activity. And it's all about, to me, a telecare, and to Yorball, a telecare device is a window into somebody's eye. It's not a big ugly box with a red button that does one thing. It's so much more, and it should be so much more. but that's a story for another day. We will be having a webinar. It will be either the next one or the one after on the value of data, common data sets, etc., etc. But we're going to move over to some Q&A now before we finish. I've just had to spend the last 5 minutes scrolling up on the chat board. So I'm going to start at the top with some of these questions. I do apologise if we don't get to everybody. But here's a question for Rupert. Openreach, this is from Isabella Gruszczyk. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Isabella. Openreach have scheduled stop sell for my area for November 2022. I'm sorry, don't know what area that is. What does the pause mean for stop sell? Do we need to worry? So I suppose that is an Openreach question, maybe to you, John.
Let me take that one first. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about stop sell, and we haven't really helped, I think, in many ways. So let's be really clear what stop sell means. It doesn't mean anything to do with stopping the PSTN lines any earlier. Okay, stop sell actually nationally comes into effect from September next year, and stop sell is about Openreach being able to stop selling the all copper 1980s equipment lines, because that's what we've got to get off of. Today, communications providers can still buy shed loads of PSTN lines from us. We cannot stop them doing it until September 2023 in many, many cases. And that's making the problem bigger and bigger and bigger. We don't want that. We want the problem to get smaller because people move to fibre. So at the moment, we can't stop communication providers from buying that from us nationally. From September 2023 we can. Why is it September 2023? Because we had to give the industry 5 years notice. This program started in 2018. There's also a stop sell list that you refer to. The stop sell list is where we've been given dispensation from Ofcom to go earlier with that date rather than September 2023, and that is predicated on us putting at least 75% fibre to the premises in that exchange area. So there are about 600 odd exchanges on that list. Again, the great news for many people is that means there's going to be a lot of fibre in the area. It doesn't mean anything to do with the 2025. 2025 is still there. It doesn't change the fact that communication providers have still got to get us all off onto a fibre-based product by 2025. So again, don't think about the stop sell as a geographic, oh, we're earlier, we're going to do something earlier. You're not. All it means is that in stop sell areas, you have more fibre available for your communication providers to move you over. And it means that a lot of people in that area are more likely to move to full fibre to the premises, rather than to part fibre to the cabinet. But that's all it means. And it's a question I get every single day, because it is a kind of a confusing thing. So it's a really good question, and I'm glad you brought it out. But just think about, if your exchange is on that list, doesn't mean anything for you in terms of what you've got to do. It just means that in that area, there's more fibre to the premises available. And it means that therefore we can stop selling in those areas earlier than September 2023, the old legacy products. Is that okay?
And I again, as I said, part of our business is internet service connectivity provision, and I totally echo that, John. That's up to we get those stop sell indications week in, week out, and effectively we've actually stopped selling other than in extreme circumstances where a customer has no other option. We don't sell legacy products anymore, and that's our choice. But thank you for that. ATA adapters, there's a blast from the past. I remember ATA, involved in VoIP for many, many years, and I remember ATA. To me, ATA adapters have always been flaky. I don't think I've ever come across an ATA adapter that works first time, every time, 100% of the time. Just don't personally, it's my personal view, that technology, I don't believe in it. But that lack of reliability, it's not just me saying that, there's an awful lot of people saying this. And Adam Fay has asked, are the TSA cascading this message to members who are planning to use TSAs? Because there are organisations out there that are actively promoting the sale and take up of ATAs, when these things are just, as I said, in my opinion, these things are just not reliable. I've been in that side of the industry for many years, but it appears that there's a lot of other people that agree with me. What's the TSA's viewpoint on this, and what are you doing in terms of, as Adam says, cascading that information out?
Well, we're holding regular digital surgeries where we're discussing these kinds of issues and making sure that we're passing on the correct guidance. And you know, we were talking about stop sell earlier. All of that key messaging that's coming out, and our dealings with different providers and the different types of equipment that they provide is being cascaded out. And we'll obviously just continue to provide best practice guidance around that. So you know, it's a case of dealing with lots of different SPs, and I think that that's quite a difficult job to actually do, but we're obviously operating our digital help desk and work with OFT, etc. So we're trying to get the best information out to the sector through the different communication channels that we have. But you know, lots of different surgeries and events that are taking place. There's a whole section on our website as well with different guidance sets, and we're carrying out lots of proactive outreach with membership directly as well. So organisations can raise queries with us, and we've actually been commissioned to provide this digital help desk, so people can come to us with any individual technical queries that they may have.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Rupert. That's very useful. I think it's just about making things clear to people, and I think one of the issues there is that whilst whether it's anecdotal evidence or technical evidence, that if it is saying that these things can't be seen as 100% reliable, totally reliable, we've got to get that message out to people, because it's a dangerous situation. We have a member of the audience called Brad. Brad's asked quite a few questions and engaged, which thank you very much for doing so. So Brad, he's asked made an interesting statement, which I think we alluded to earlier on. If we are going to do this, we need to make sure LARCs provide APIs so that telecare data can be shared, etc., etc. And it comes back to that data question. I'm going to throw this one at Phil. What's your view of that? It's that scape argument again, isn't it?
Well, to be honest, I think for anyone who's worked for a reasonable length of time in the digital side of things, it's a different world. So we are absolutely used to sharing data because that's how the entire system works. It's not that it's against the norm; it is the norm. So, you know, I get drawn into multiple conversations about Scape 50134, you know, whatever. Yeah, to us, it's kind of an irrelevance because it's just a translation table within a database. We can squirt it in whatever format anyone wants. We just need to know what data to where, and then we'll work with anyone. And I think that seems to be external to the organisations potentially that are ring fencing. The general norm for all innovators and disruptors within the market is we all want to play really nicely. Hence, you know, look, there's different manufacturers on this that all sell into the same market and potentially don't always necessarily work together. We you know, Peter, you and I can be competitors at different times. You know, that's the nature of it is that we have to work together because the end result is the most important thing, which is the better outcome for civilization, you know, and, you know, actually the public purse, because, you know, I really got frustrated earlier on when we're talking about, you know, the cost of these things. The cost of these things are going to save the NHS a fortune. We just got the money in the wrong blooming pot. Let's start doing it properly. And then we'll look. Right, I'm stopping. I'm done.
Yeah, do you know what? You are spot on, absolutely, and thank you for answering that. I'm going to take one final question because I know this conversation's been going on a bit. Deborah Gent is talking about the standards for mobile devices, and I asked her specifically. I don't know if anybody else has noticed the conversation going on there, but thank you, Deborah, for that. And yes, as I thought you were referring to 50134, the standard for social alarms. Now it's quite interesting, and maybe Rupert or others want to comment on this. coming into it from the Yorble perspective, because we had to go through all of this, yeah, we do not call ourselves a social alarm. We do not use that terminology anywhere in any of our material. We do not call ourselves a social alarm. We are a digital telecare alarm. And it's the social alarm bit, which is optional, Deborah, that then suddenly brings in the 869.868 megahertz side of things. You have no requirement to adhere to that. It's an option. But Rupert, can you clarify TSA perspective on that? I know it's not exactly your thing. We should have had Paul on here or one of the others, but have you got a feeling on that?
Yeah, I think what TSA sets out is that devices should adhere to EN 50134 Part 2, but that's obviously has the emphasis on the manufacturer to comply with those standards, and they obviously go through that rigorous assessment process that's part of that. So that's what we set out. We're not a device standards body, but we recommend that they adhere to that standard.
Okay, and do you recommend they adhere to all of that standard? Because, for example, we work very closely with you, with Paul Finch, with the others, to take the Yorble devices and what we do through those standards, and got absolute clarity that yes, we were acceptable, which is why you yourself and others are recommending us out there. So I need to be absolutely clear for Deborah and other people out there. Are you recommending that they have to be adhere to all of this, the aspects of those of 50134 or not?
Well, I think it has to be applicable. I must admit, I'm not on the technical side in terms of those standards, so it might be something that I have to take away and talk with some of my colleagues further within TSA on that. But I think that it's where it's applicable to those devices. But I feel that I should take that kind of.
No, I totally agree, Rupert, and I think it's worthwhile taking that back, and I know there's been some further clarification and other things in other areas over the last couple of months, but maybe that's an objective, and I will get you for a fill, don't worry. But I think for the TSA to actually clarify that situation, because I think it's very important for people like Deborah. She's being held up on something that I know she shouldn't be held up on. She doesn't need to be held up on, and quite legally, effectively so. She just needs that clarification. Phil, you've got to chime in.
I just wanted to come back to Deborah's original question, which I think is actually a really valid point. Is what she's saying is, so she's got a concern, is the fact that she's giving out mobile telecare. What happens when the device is being charged? The person hasn't got the piece of telecare with them. So that's a really valid point. Just stepping it away from the standards, and thankfully we've got Rupert here to do add clarity to all of that. But from the perspective of the 360-degree 24/7 cover of a person, and let's ignore the fact that out of 200 people run with their button and boxes, that only 20% of them actually knew where their pendant was. That was a piece of surveying that was done elsewhere. Ignore that. Let's say that we've got someone who's really engaged with their piece of telecare, that they're really using it. How do we protect them at those times? There are solutions. There are Bluetooth transmitters that can connect to. There are other technologies. You can. The whole point of digital is you can layer. It isn't a single shot. It isn't fire and forget. It is what works for the person. So I think, and to answer Deborah's question, she's absolutely right to query why that's not right. But actually, that shouldn't be the stop point. That should be the start point for where we have great information available that says, well, actually, have you considered that you could do this in a digital world? And that for me was the bit that maybe was being missed.
No, I think so, and I think we need to remember with wearables that it pretty much doesn't matter what wearable you've got. Sooner or later, it's got to be recharged or the battery's going to be replaced, and that just isn't going to happen on your body. It's not going to happen. So you're absolutely right, having the opportunity to layer capabilities, and there are opportunities for that all the way over. But there are going to be moments that we can't avoid in certain cases where people are going to be out of cover. Yeah. Now, whether that's they need to be out of cover, charging their wearable overnight whilst they're in bed with their device moved from downstairs because it's portable upstairs to the bedroom, sitting beside them, so they can just press the button there. That's one way of doing it. Whether it's swapping long-lasting batteries, there's many ways of doing it, but there is going to be those occasions. Sadly, I have to bring this to a close. These occasions are always good fun, and we try and make it more of a chat and a debate as much as we possibly can, and we do try and answer as many questions as we can. The next one will be we're probably going to have a little rest for through till September. So the next webinar will be in September, and they'll be monthly from that point onwards, other than major holiday breaks. Keep an eye on us on LinkedIn, Yorble Technologies on LinkedIn, or on our Eventbrite link, and you'll find out when the next one is and what it's all about. So thank you all for attending. Thank you very much for our panelists. I've no doubt we will see many of you again, and first timers, John, Sodi and Rupert, do hope you'll come back in the right circumstances with the right subjects. I'm sure there'll be more. And thank you everybody for your time and questions. And again, sorry we didn't get to every single one of them. I will go through and see what's there that we can answer directly. If you want any questions, I'm sure all of the guys will be happy to answer questions directly with you, as will I. But until next time, don't be too hot. Keep those bananas ready. They're very good for you. Cheers.
Thanks
Bye.
all. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks all. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.